In today's video, we'll be looking at creepy and scary TikToks that you probably should not watch before bed.
Survived their saw trap, but I don't think deserved it. I'm gonna go with Bobby Dagan from Saw 7. Bobby comes out as a jigsaw survivor. He says that he survived this very traumatizing trap where he had to pierce hooks through his pectoral muscles and pull himself to the ceiling without his muscles ripping so he could survive. He gains a lot of fame and notoriety over this idea. He writes a book, he makes a bunch of money. But he was lying. He was never put in a jigsaw trap in the first place. So now the current jigsaw killer catches him and puts him through all of these tests, and everybody who has helped him with the lie, he puts them in traps as well. And Bobby's goal is to save all of the people who have helped him with the lie. And I will say, Bobby does try really hard, but he doesn't save anyone. His final test is with his wife. His poor innocent wife who had no idea he was lying. She met him after the fact. In order to save her, he has to put himself through the exact trap that he claims he went through. But as he reaches the ceiling, his muscles rip and he falls. And his wife burns alive.
The Scavenger's Daughter was created during the reign of Henry VIII by Sir Leonard Skevington. This instrument of torture consisted of a metal rack shaped like an A-frame. The victim's head was secured to the top point of the A, while the hands were strapped at the midpoint, and the legs were fastened at the lower spread ends. The rack could be folded, causing the head to swing downward and the knees to be forced up into a seated position, exerting pressure on the body, often leading to the discharge of blood from the nose and ears. One well-documented case involving the Scavenger's Daughter is that of Thomas Mia, an Irishman accused of associating with rebels in Ireland. It is believed that Mia inscribed the following words on the wall of the Beauchamp Tower in the Tower of London, referencing the torture he endured. "By torture strange my truth was tried, yet of my liberty denied." 1581. Thomas Mia.
When discussing the 7 deadly sins, the sin of wrath is said to be the most terrifying and relentless of them all. It is believed to take over the mind and body of those it controls, meaning it has no counters whatsoever. That last part was a lie.
Oh, ain't that something? Drums came in, you ain't see that coming.
Before they freeze to death, some people exhibit the bizarre behavior of paradoxical undressing. They literally undress just before they die, smiling as they do so. When freezing to death, the blood vessels at the end of the body contract to increase the warming blood flow to the vital internal organs and brain. The constricted vessels eventually tire and thus slacken again. The blood flows back to the ends of the body, creating a very hot illusion. As a result, frostbitten people take off their clothes and smile with relieved joy.
If I had to describe Postal to someone who wasn't familiar with it, I would describe it as what boomers think GTA is. You know how you always hear on the news, they're like, oh, in GTA, the goal of the game is to run people over and then shoot them with guns and light them on fire. And it's like, sure, you can do that, but that's not really like, you know, what the game's about. In Postal, that is absolutely what the game is about. It's very satirical and very over the top in its presentation, but graphic nonetheless.
Never played
Sure,
it.
a lot of games will let you set someone on fire or shoot them, but in Postal, you can pee on their corpse, which is really what it's all about. It's graphic and over the top because that's exactly what it's.
Strange videos found on the deep web.
Dirty animal facts
Creepy.
that biology class definitely didn't teach you. Part 3. The cat sex chemical in plastic bags are almost identical under a microscope, so if you catch your cat licking a plastic bag, it's probably because it's making it sexually aroused. If a dolphin nutted inside you, your organs would explode from the sheer force and speed of its climax. Blue crabs will eat anything within a few days and mutilate the bones beyond recognition. When spotted hyenas give birth, the pups have to pass through a half PP, half clitoris birth canal, meaning they literally have to claw their way into the world or suffocate dry. Barnacles have the highest schlong to body size ratio in the animal kingdom. Platypus don't have nipples. They just kind of sweat milk. Tapirs have prehensile peepees, meaning they can grip with it. This is especially useful during mating because the males can use it to hold the females in place. Here are some facts.
Yo, these are some crazy facts. Like, what? I won't even think about any of that stuff.
That you probably didn't know that one day could save your life. If your pupils don't dilate to the same size, there is a very real chance you have brain damage. A motorcycle helmet is stronger than a skull. Tea bags actually stop bleeding. They contain a chemical called tannic, which naturally clots your blood. If you're in the wilderness and desperately need water, you can take a plastic bag and hold it against the branch of a willow tree, and it will condensate drinkable water into the bag. Never put tools or heavy objects on the back seat or dash of your car. If you get into a crash, you might survive the collision, but these items could be the cause of your death. If you see vultures circling above you, chances are there's a predator nearby and it's about to make a kill. Grapefruits can actually mess with prescription medication, and the most common of these is birth control. So stay away, because trust me, you do not have the time for a grapefruit baby. If a canker sore in your mouth or tongue isn't going away after 2 weeks, you might want to get it checked out because it very well could be oral cancer.
The scariest close calls with death. Watch as this guy base jumps off of this cliff, but he fails to jump far enough. Just look how close he was to hitting the cliff in this frame. He then pulls the parachute and this happens. The parachute got tangled up, sending him straight into the cliff. Thankfully, he did survive and he was rescued from the cliff edge 17 hours later.
That look crazy, don't it? From the little 360
Followed
camera.
more.
This baby fell 11 floors from her grandfather's arms. On July 2019, 18-month-old Chloe and her family were vacationing at the Royal Caribbean Cruises in Puerto Rico when her grandfather sat her at the window ledge and she fell 11 floors to the ground. Chloe's grandfather, Salvatore Anello, says that it was all an accident and he thought the window was closed. He said he leaned Chloe against the window because that's what she likes to do. Chloe's mother, Kim, was devastated, but she does stand by her father and says that the cruise was negligent and should have never had an open window by a kid's play area.
Chloe's family says she fell through that open window set to slide open to provide ventilation in what's known as the H2O zone aboard the cruise ship. A family attorney says the toddler's grandfather, Sam, placed her on a railing to look outside, believing he was lifting the toddler behind a wall of glass.
After the cruise ship reviewed their surveillance footage, there seems to be more to the story.
But ship video, first shown on TV in Puerto Rico last month, shows Anello leaning out the window for about 8 seconds while Chloe is still on the ground. Then he lifts the girl up and over a wooden rail. He held her for about 34 seconds before she slipped from his arms. Royal Caribbean says the video proves Anello had to know the window was open and recklessly lifted Chloe over the window.
Salvatore pleaded guilty to negligent homicide and was sentenced to 3 years probation.
I saw a creature.
Yeah. All the parents out there, right? Someone does that to your child. Wouldn't you be upset if they only got 3 years of probation? Man, that's messed up.
You're in a huge black forest in France. Cryptids. Greetings, everyone. I want to share with you an encounter I made in September 2012 in a French woods in the neighborhood of Beaugenanjou. I am not sure of the name of the forest. It could be Les Bois d'Anjou or La Fort de Méniel de Chandelay. Anyway, I am still haunted by this creepy encounter. I just can't accept being unable to know what was that scary creature. So, I was 20, and I was in an old small truck with an older friend who was the driver. I was sitting on the passenger place on the right of the truck. The truck was very old, and I remember we couldn't go faster than 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. We were driving since Le Havre in Normandy, and we took only the very small road in order to stop anywhere we wanted to visit, old church or abandoned house, German fortification, etc. We were expecting to arrive at our destination, a troglodyte house that belonged to friends of mine, around 3 a.m. in the morning. But we were late, and it was 3 a.m. when we enter a huge dark forest in the night. We were driving slowly in the woods on a straight small road. The old lights of the truck were some kind of blinking yellow. At a point, I saw some very black humanoid outline on the left side of the road. It was a very clear outline because it was in the light of our truck. otherwise I wouldn't even have seen it. The creature was on 2 legs as a biped, no tail. At first I couldn't see any arms. As we were slowly approaching the creature, I saw it turning its head in our direction. We were silent in the truck, saying no words. My friend was just driving and I was wondering if I was hallucinating. We slowly drive in its direction, and it started to cross the road as it was staring at us. It has big yellow eyes like a owl. It was around 1 meter 50 centimeters high. We almost were at its level, and I remember fearing that it opened my truck door and grabbed me. I was really in fear. I saw its arms swinging along its thin black hairy body. It arrived on the other side of the road and suddenly stop and turn in our direction, still staring at me. A few seconds later we passed it, and I didn't move my head, just looking at the right rearview mirror, seeing that it was staring at our truck, watching us drive away from him. My friend and I didn't say a word, and half an hour later we drive out the dark woods and I said something like, "Well, weird things in the woods, right?" And my friend was suddenly extremely nervous, saying, "Yeah, did you see that? What the fuck was that?" We talked about it and he saw the same thing as me. He thought he was hallucinating because we were very tired. But no, we saw that thing in the woods. Today he is in his 60s and I am in my 30s, and we are both still haunted by this thing. We talk about it every time we meet each other. He is particularly marked by the intelligence in its big yellow eyes. I know this could be explained, but to be honest, I am an urbexer since 2004. I visit the catacombs of Paris every 2 months. I saw weird stuff during my explorations, but I never feared anything. But this thing, it scares me, really. Anyway, one day I found a picture on the internet. Sadly, I didn't find the artist, and there were no context, but it looks like a lot like what I saw, except for the eyes. The creature I saw had very big round yellow eyes.
What's that noise, y'all? Footsteps.
A very old pub in York, England is hiding a rather sinister secret. In 1816, a large hole was uncovered which led to a secret dungeon. The spooky dungeon was complete with manacles and chains hanging from the walls. Around this time, a tunnel was also found that was said to lead to the York Minster. However, the superstitious locals soon bricked it up, claiming they could hear ghostly footsteps echoing from the tunnel. And those who went down by candlelight claimed to see phantom shadows. This spooky pub was a former jail on the walls of York. You can see behind me an original window from the jail, and it actually gives the place its name, the Hole in the Wall. Creepy laugh alert. Spooky. So, being a former jail has strong links to the fact that a dungeon was discovered in the pub. But the hauntings don't end there, of course. I got chatting with the bar manager who showed me this photograph taken around Christmas time last year. You can see a large mist that appeared on the photo. Even stranger, the boy stood by this, claims to have felt a phantom.
This is the moment Alexi threw her newborn baby in the trash.
Hospital surveillance video shows Treviso leave her patient room at 1:38 a.m., waddling toward the bathroom while clutching her back. Treviso remains in the bathroom for 19 minutes as multiple people check on her.
I knocked on the door and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just having a hard time going to the bathroom," is what she replied. So I was like, okay.
Surveillance video captures that moment as Treviso leaves the bathroom and heads back to the patient room. It was then that hospital staff got a look at the bloody bathroom for the first time.
And all I saw was like blood everywhere, like on the walls, on the toilet. It just looked like a horror film.
Police speak to multiple people who saw the bathroom, describing fresh blood on the walls, floor, and near the toilet.
The toilet's right here where you're at, and then the sink's right here. It was like up this way, blood splatter.
What if,
like,
in your line of work, what would cause that kind of splatter?
I think something that got pulled out.
Have you ever heard of the Filipino urban legend of the Duende? The Duende is a mythical creature in Filipino folklore. These supernatural beings are believed to be small, dwarf-like creatures with pointed ears and beady eyes. Duendes are said to inhabit natural environments such as forests, mountains, and ancestral
Some
lands.
little trolls.
Duendes are known for their mischievous nature, often playing pranks on humans or causing minor disturbances. They are believed to be guardians of nature, residing in anthills or small termite mounds known as punso. Disturbing or disrespecting their dwelling can bring bad luck or misfortune. In Filipino culture, people have various beliefs and practices associated with the duendes. Some offer food or small gifts to appease them and seek their favor or protection. It is common for individuals to avoid stepping on anthills or disturbing natural habitats that may house duendes out of respect and superstition. Duendes are deeply ingrained in Filipino folklore, reflecting the country's rich mythology and belief in supernatural creatures. The stories of duendes serve as a reminder of the importance of living in harmony with nature and respecting the unseen beings that may.
This is a scary story about the twin sisters. There was a woman named Jenna who had a twin sister named Hannah. Jenna was single, alone, and unemployed, and Hannah had a husband, 2 kids, and a good job. They never talked, and Jenna was extremely jealous of Hannah. One day, Hannah texted Jenna to catch up and get some lunch. Jenna agreed and they met. After talking for a while, Hannah started telling Jenna to get her life together. This angered Jenna, but she just sat there and agreed. They then finished up and left the restaurant. Jenna was still angry about what Hannah said, so she followed her home and came up with a plan. Jenna then walked into Hannah's house, grabbed a knife, and began stabbing Hannah. She then hid Hannah's body and put on her clothes from her closet. She then sat on the couch and watched TV. Not too long after, Hannah's husband walked in with their kids. He then looked at Jenna and said, "Hello babe, how was your day?" As the kids jumped on her screaming mommy. Jenna smiled and said it was great honey, as she sat there excited for her new life.
Now, LSD Dream Emulator is outright a form of interpretive art. It doesn't try to be a standard video game. As a matter of fact, Osamu stated multiple times that he made this for people who do not enjoy or can't play standard video games. So LSD Dream Emulator was made for the PlayStation as a sort of art exhibit. Osamu built the landscapes based on inspirations he had from his own lucid dreams, as well as dream journals from those he knew. Because of this, several people who see the game says that it gives them an intense feeling of familiarity, despite the incredibly alien format most of these worlds exist in. Given the drastic contrast between elements of the world that are known and elements that are staunchly unknown, many believe LSD Dream Emulator to be the first piece of media that really captured the horror of liminal spaces.
At the foot of the shambles in York, you'll find a 16th century building that is said to be the most haunted in York. This building is now world famous for its 5 ghosts that dwell inside. Welcome to York's most haunted pub. Cheers to that. Now time to get scared. There's so many creepy stories I could tell from this pub. However, I'm going to choose one that the barmaid told me and is unknown to the public. So let me take you back to All Hallows Eve 2003. The barmaid at the time was fairly new and had just gotten rid of all the punters when she was about to lock the doors. In barges a man dressed in bizarre clothes who introduced himself as George and said he must go to his room upstairs. The barmaid requested he calms down and asked which room he was staying in, but the man appeared very confused and couldn't tell her, eventually becoming more aggressive. He then shouted, "You'll let me in, wench, or I'll wring your neck." Absolutely terrified, the barmaid ran into the ladies' toilet, locking the door, and called the landlord. He was a few roads down by the York Minster, yet fled all the way to the Golden Fleece. But when he got there, he found it completely normal. Yet the barmaid said this was impossible. She could hear the man shouting and banging on the bathroom door just as the landlord entered. Both feeling rather perplexed, the landlord checked the CCTV footage, only to find that the barmaid was alone the entire time.
Oh wow. So it was a ghost or something?
I haven't been affected by a movie like this for a really long time. Not since I watched the movie Afterlife has a movie stayed with me so painfully as this one has. Before I get into this review, I have to give you a trigger warning for SA and CA. Fucking hell. My name's Ricky. I watch disturbing movies, and this is The War Zone. This movie was released in 1999 and was directed by Tim Roth. It stars Ray Winstone, Tilda Swinton, Laura Belmont, and Freddie Cunliffe. This movie centers around a family who have recently moved down to Devon to start their life sober. They live in this isolated house, isolated from their neighbors, and they're kind of drawn inside constantly because of the bad weather. So they're having to spend an awful lot of time with each other. But they seem like a close family. Ray Winstone's character, who's known as Dad, is an incredibly loving, attentive father, as is the mum, played by Tilda Swinton. She's pregnant and she has a baby. Whilst on the way to the hospital, The car flips, and she gives birth in the car. This seems to bring the family even closer together, but we do start to see that there's something not quite right. Tom sees his sister and his dad doing something through a window one day on his way back to the house, and he confronts his sister about this, and she of course denies it, but he doesn't let it go. He's somewhat obsessed with his older sister in a really uncomfortable way, and we get the impression that he feels quite jealous of what's happening.
They got some crazy stuff
come to
going
light
on.
that his dad is doing terrible things to his older sister. I'm not going to say anything else about the plots of this movie. This is a really well-made film. The acting alone in this movie is some of the best acting I've ever seen on screen. I was crying throughout this entire film. It moved me that much. And I can't stop thinking about certain things that happened in this movie. Certain things that I simply cannot describe to you here. Things that will probably stay with me for a long time, especially as a parent to a young child. This movie has really got into my head.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna watch
Cinematography and sound
this.
design in this movie is spot on. It's a perfect film. Everything is amazing. This movie is so affecting because it's so realistic. The film critic Robert Ebert said, "It's not just a movie about SA or CA, but about its dynamic, about the way it plays upon guilt and shame, and addresses old and secret wounds." And I couldn't agree more. We see Tom's older sister persecuted for the things her dad is doing to her. The victim is blamed and shamed, and as a result hates herself. This movie is messed up, but not in the way you think. It's not graphic and it's not gory. I need way longer than 3 minutes to talk about this. If you do choose to watch this film, don't go into it lightly.
This is Albert Fish, the cannibal pedophile serial killer. Let me warn you, this is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever heard of, so if you're squeamish, turn this TikTok off now. Keep swiping.
Y'all sure y'all want to watch this? What do you call him? A cannibal pedophile what?
So this is a young Albert Fish. He was born in 1870 and his actual name is Hamilton Fish. But early in life, he decided to go by Albert because kids in the orphanage that he stayed in would call him Ham and Eggs, and he didn't like that name. Interestingly, a lot of Albert's family members suffered from psychiatric diseases, and as you'll see in the story, so did Albert. So when Albert Fish was at that orphanage, he was sexually and physically abused a number of times. But in his journals later in life, he actually wrote down that he began to enjoy the pain that was inflicted onto him. This would start Albert Fish down the sadomasochistic path that would lead to some of the most depraved crimes in American history. Albert was eventually taken out of the orphanage at age 12, where he started a relationship with another young boy. And this is where some of his more colorful sexual desires began to develop. He and this young boy would drink each other's pee, eat each other's poop, and do a lot of other bizarre things. In his younger years in the city, he would often visit bathhouses and just watch men undress, and he also wrote to women in newspapers, writing them obscene letters that were so graphic that oftentimes he got the police called on him. At age 20, Albert moved to New York City, and this is where he started his life of crime. While living in New York City, Albert Fish worked as a male prostitute, and sadly he began to assault young boys, most of them being under the age of 6 years old. It was like his pastime. But Albert's mother arranged a marriage for him. He married a woman named Anna, and they actually had 6 kids together. Albert worked as a painter, so he traveled all the time, and it was during this time of his life when he met a young man named Thomas Kedden, who was mentally disabled. Eventually, Albert brought Thomas out to a barn in the middle of the woods that was somewhat abandoned, and that's where he began the 2-week torture of Thomas Kedden. Now, like I said, this is an extremely disturbing story, and this is a disturbing part of the story, but while Albert kept Thomas out at that barn, he forced him to engage in a lot of bizarre activities like eating feces off of each other, drinking each other's urine. He would beat him, burn him, and at one point, Albert literally cut off half of Thomas's penis. Albert would later describe this incident in his journal, saying, "I shall never forget his scream or the look he gave me." He was originally going to kill Thomas, but he ended up actually just dressing the wound in Vaseline and peroxide, and then he gave him a kiss on the cheek, left, and he wrote in his journal that he never knew what happened to him. Now at this point, it's unknown if Albert had actually killed anybody yet, but he couldn't stop himself and his desires were too strong to handle, and he was developing a cannibalistic desire that he really needed to live out. And this is where the story gets even more disturbing. I'm going to post a part 2 because I'm going to run out of time, but if you want to hear the full story right now, you can listen to my wife and I's podcast, Murder in America. Just search Murder in America, Albert Fish, but I'm warning you, the episode is graphic.
That was creepy and nasty. People are weird.
I found a horror game where you have to save your dog from an evil corporation, and it is terrifying. Let's talk about Canine. Full playthrough right here. The game starts with a tragic situation. Your dog Tommy has been missing for 3 weeks, and you receive a mysterious call saying that he's at an Umbral veterinary clinic. Who called you? Why would they know where Tommy is? And what is the Umbral veterinary clinic? Once you find the clinic, you read some dark reports that tell you the secret of what's going on. This clinic has been capturing dogs all over town for a while now. They have been genetically mutating these dogs with human men in order to create a demigod. And one of those creations named Reuben is in the facility. The clinic believes that this fusion of man and dog is the only way to create this so-called demigod, which, according to their documentation, has almost supernatural powers. Find your dog Tommy, evade Reuben, and escape the facility. Because you were called here for a reason, and you cannot let the clinic win.
Some crazy horror games out here. Cemetery Vampire.
Welcome to Inson Makerfield Cemetery. This is now filled with 2 abandoned chapels that are Grade 2 listed buildings from the Victorian period. But inside they hide a rather creepy legend. It is said that a vampire lurks within one of these old buildings. So naturally, let's have a look inside. Nature has now crept in and took over the old rotting brick both inside and outside the chapels. Over time, its old vampire legend has been covered up. However, I've found it and will share with you today. So, let's step back in time to Wigan, 1913. It was early dusk when a man walking through the cemetery came across the dead body of a local man. He had a large gaping wound to his neck which had appeared to be caused by a sharp object. But, most horrifyingly of all, he appeared to be completely drained of blood, despite police saying his body could not have been there more than 24 hours. News of the vicious murder swept throughout Wigan, and it wasn't long before a vampire legend was started. People passing through the cemetery after dark reportedly seen a tall, thin man with a chalk-white face and sunken eyes lurking round one of the chapels. He was even encountered one day by the local priest, who said it was surely a creature from the depths of hell. 2 men chased it one night and seen it go under a tomb. Now, what I'm about to show you here is the actual crypt that is said to go under the cemetery, and is where the vampire allegedly dwells. The 2 men were loyal Christians and would not have this unholy creature stalking their community. So one night, armed with spades, they went into the cemetery under the light of the moon. They spotted the creature and gave chase. However, it managed to move a very heavy slab of a tomb, sneak underneath, and evade capture.
Man, look. I don't know, y'all. Do y'all believe in vampires? I mean, I don't know. It's possible, right? It's crazy. But yeah, these are some of the most creepy and scary TikToks that you can find on the internet. If you like the content, don't forget to subscribe, turn your notification bell on, and until next time, YouTube, peace.